Hey, L through Z myth and symbol folks. I just wanted to record this lecture for you. First, a couple of reasons. One, biggest reason, I think I'm going to be out. And I wanted to make sure that you had this lecture so that you could start your essay and that you could feel like we're still caught up. I figured this was something I can do to kind of keep us going and keep us caught up. That way we don't have to wait a whole nother week to get this started and we can just move on with monsters next week. Secondly, I realized that actually with all of the cases of COVID that we've had right now at Stevens, I feel as if there are quite a few students that are missing class right now. And so I wanted to make sure everybody has a chance to see this lecture or hear it. So this is not an ideal setup. I'm sure that it's going to be difficult to sit through this lecture with your earbuds in over your own computer. At least the good news is you can pause me and you can go get a drink or something, or go to the bathroom and take a little break if you're feeling like this is just getting to be a little bit too boring. I hope it's not boring. I find semiotics to be really interesting, but of course, anything if you're doing it for 95 minutes straight is going to be tough. I'm going to try to condense portions of this lecture, but it is kind of difficult, especially since the L through Z folks haven't even had even a little bit of a taste of this. My A through Z folks had a few of these slides that we handled, but not you guys because there are more of you testing last week. So I want us to do our best to kind of do this lecture I want to talk you through the idea of semiotics, semiotic analysis, and then next week we will attempt to do monsters and to kind of bring monsters into all of this semiotic stuff. So here we go. This painting I love to use for this unit because really it is Hieronymus Bosch, and it's called the Garden of Earthly Delights, but also the whole thing is called Before the Flood. And it has a ton of interesting elements to analyze about it. This lecture is going to be heavy in looking at art because art is one of the first places where people seem to use like images in order to create or analyze meaning. And essentially, that's kind of what we're doing in semiotics. So I use art a lot to show you how semiotics works. And so art is kind of a key. There are a couple of reasons why I think semiotics is a fun thing for me to teach and important for you to learn. First, one thing I hope you take from it is to become a critical consumer of information. We need to be critical consumers. A theorist, a very smart man named Theodore Adorno said, he's a famous culture critic, and he said that the culture industry creates culture industry consumer regression. And the culture industry is like consumer industries, pretty much all the products that we buy and sell, and also the entertainment industry. He says that the consumer regression is actually how the entertainment industry seeks to create a standardized and a passive consumer. And so what they want you to do is just take their word for it. If they say that you need this thing, then you say, oh, I need this thing because they told me to. And they want you to be standardized, and they want you to be passive, not be critical thinkers about what you're consuming. Do you guys see a problem with consumers acting in this way where we just passively accept everything that we're being told we need? Could be a problem. Second, another reason is actually semiotics is used pretty heavily in a lot of different careers. First of all, marketing and advertising, it's used 100%. And if you looked at your resources and reading page, you would see I even have an example of that in there with a PowerPoint, how marketers appeal semiotically to their consumers. There would be also careers such as visual design, architecture, interior design, graphic design, any type of image heavy where you're trying to appeal to a consumer or trying to appeal to someone visually. So any of those careers are going to study and look into semiotics. Also, really used heavily in software and hardware development now. So ultimately, what I want you guys to learn in this unit is that you'll start to understand on a basic level how semiotics works. So you'll understand the connection between the sign, the signifier, and the signified. And then you're going to hopefully learn how a sign can affect your assumptions, impressions, and ultimately your decision making, how the way that you see something and the implications in that thing can affect your decision making. And I hope that you'll be able to perform a semiotic analysis in order to more actively and critically consume information and cultural products rather than just being a compliant consumer. So I start the lecture by asking the class to think about what they think these words mean, high art and low art, and what you think the differences might be between these two things. So what are what's high art, what's low art, and what are the differences? I'm just pausing to let you think. Really, what the conclusion that we often come to when I'm questioning the class about this is that high art might be something that society has deemed as, more intricate, wow, and more full of meaning, or perhaps it's like the medium, like painting. Basically, it's kind of like if society says it's high art, then it is. It's like for the affluent. Whereas low art, it's not that it doesn't have meaning; it totally still does. But for some reason, maybe it's more like art for the masses that anybody can understand. Whereas high art, there's this idea that you have to be like cultured and really um, educated to understand it. And I'm here to tell you that with semiotic analysis, you really don't. You really don't have to be cultured and educated. And what we might view as low art or art for the masses can also be full of meaning, and you can find the meaning in both of those things. Basically, I have you watch Butters here, and I honestly don't know if this is going to play. It is. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get it to play.
No thanks. I love life. Huh? But you just got dumped. Well, yeah, and I'm sad. But at the same time, I'm really happy that something can make me feel that sad. It's like, it makes me feel alive, you know? It makes me feel human. The only way I can feel this sad now is if I felt something really good before. So I have to take the bad with the good. So I guess what I'm feeling is like a beautiful sadness. I guess that sounds stupid.
Yeah.
Let me do that one more time over here because I think I found it now. But I think it's so funny to be thinking about this art that's produced mass production, right? Art for the masses, and probably often considered low art. South Park's probably considered low art. But listen to that meaning. I'm going to let you hear it one more time.
No thanks. I love life. Huh?
But you just got dumped.
Well, yeah, and I'm sad. But at the same time, I'm really happy that something can make me feel that sad. It's like, it makes me feel alive, you know? It makes me feel human. The only way I can feel this sad now is if I felt something really good before. So I have to take the bad with the good. So I guess what I'm feeling is like a beautiful sadness. I guess that sounds stupid.
Yeah.
So I love what Butters does for us here because he takes this, what might be low art, and he expresses this profound meaning of, what makes us human is that we can experience this profound, beautiful sadness so that even when we're sad, right, that's positive because we can have emotions, and that's a beautiful thing. And so he talks about taking the bad with the good. So I'm going to see if we can, please don't start again. Please don't do it. Just go for it. Let's go to the next slide. Hold on. I am unsure how to get this. Okay, we got it. Sorry. Okay, so with that lovely segue and beautiful transition on my part, gosh, you guys, I'm back for just like, she is amazing. Look how good she is at teaching virtually. Here is a couple of ideas. Here are a couple of ideas on what semiotics is. So I've been saying semiotics a lot. What does that mean? Well, semiotics is an investigation into how meaning is created. When we look at something, how do we basically assess like how that means something? So it's an investigation or a study into how meaning is created, and it started initially as a study in language. So visual and linguistic together create meaning. And so the people that studied semiotics and kind of started this whole thing were studying how language and sort of a visual representation of a word create meaning together. Semiotics is also it's the study of signs. And it's a way of seeing the world and understanding of how our societal landscape, which another good word for that is your vocabulary word, our social ethos. It's a way of understanding how our social ethos and the way that we are enculturated into society, they have a massive impact on all of us unconsciously that sometimes we don't even realize it has. So the philosophy of semiotics started with this guy with the epic mustache. So he was one of the famous thinkers that was kind of thinking about semiotics and started it as a thing. His name is Saussure, Ferdinand de Saussure. He suggested that a sign, something that carries meaning, anything that carries meaning is a sign, is a combination of a signifier and a signified. And so normally in class, this is when I would write some things on the board. The signifier, so the sign is the object or thing being studied. It's that thing that we're going to try to analyze its meaning and how we arrive at that meaning. The signifier are the actual letters making up the word or the visual that represents the word. So that actual, what our eyes see, right? And then the signified is the actual meaning attached to that sign. The meaning, the images, the connotations, and the things associated with that sign that we're studying. So at this point in the lecture, we usually talk about these two. And this is usually when a lot of students start to kind of come alive with figuring out some analysis and some light bulbs start to come on. So often what I'll say is these are two different paintings, or two different pieces of art, technically. The one on the right hand side, so the Van Gogh, it's a Van Gogh piece called Old Boots. And so you kind of get a sense of what that's all about. And then the one on the left is an Andy Warhol piece of art called Diamond Dust Shoes. And we usually start by talking about clearly the sign here in both of these paintings is shoes. So if shoe is the sign, you can think about what the signifier would be. First of all, the signifier is the word shoe, but it's also the pictures that we're seeing right here in our head. But the meaning that we are associating and that's going on subconsciously in our brain is so complex. And so I begin to start asking questions to get and arrive at that meaning, to get to it. So as we're looking at this, what I start to ask students is, can you compare and contrast these two paintings? They're both shoes, but what can you tell me about the story behind these paintings and behind the shoes in these paintings? Tell me the story of these shoes. So often, eventually, students will start to arrive at some conclusions and they'll start to say, well, the shoes on the left, they seem like, they're more for fancy people. This is almost exactly what was said on Monday, because the shoes on the left are for like fancy people that do fancy things. And the shoes on the left are for people that go to work and maybe aren't fancy people or whatever. And so I will usually say, can you tell me more about that? So what does that mean? In a little bit more academic language. How can you push yourself and challenge yourself? And often students will arrive at, well, it kind of makes a statement when you contrast them, you can contrast like almost the classes of people. The one on the left is more of like a wealthy, affluent class, and the one on the right is more of like the working class people. Um, and so we're like, yeah, absolutely, that's 100% right. Those are assumptions that we can make, and some of the meanings that are attached to these shoes. And then we kind of sometimes go into how the ones on the left, the higher class maybe shoes, they of course have several different options and several different pairs because they're doing things and they have a lot of outfits, a lot of clothes. Whereas the one on the right, it seems like this is the one pair of shoes and they're very worn and they're worn a very long time and they have that like age and really solid amount of wear on them. And so you can see the lifestyle differences between these classes. Like in your head, all this stuff is happening. And then, of course, you go to the gender performances of these shoes. Many students will present their thoughts on how, of course, the left-hand side is gendered female and the right-hand side is typically gendered male, because in our society and our social ethos and how we are encultured and enculturated into society, our enculturation tells us that women will wear these kind of shoes and men would wear these kind of shoes because women are the ones that are typically like going to brunch or dressing up or wearing heels. And men are usually the ones maybe going to work and making like the breadwinners and making the money and taking care of the family. And so we can get into some kind of gender normative discussion when we're looking at these two pairs of shoes as well. And what I usually end up then telling students is the sign is the same shoes. The signifier is a little different because you're seeing different images, but look at the depth of meaning that's attached between the two paintings. You're making all these assumptions and all these things are implicated in these paintings simply because of what these things look like. And these are processes that your brain is going through subconsciously so that you're able to tell the story of these shoes without really knowing the story of these shoes. It's your social ethos, it's your enculturation that is prescribing meaning to these images or these signifiers. So I hope that's starting to kind of make sense. So what exactly is a sign? Let's look at this a bit more in depth. So we're looking at the color red, okay? So red, I can say analyze red as a sign. So you look at it and the signifier then would be really the word that spells out the color red. You're also seeing red in your head, right? So that's pretty easy. The sign and the signifier are pretty easy. The signifieds, when we think of the color red, are vast. You see on this diagram, sometimes when people think of red, they think of apples. And then if you were to dive into apple and try to find the signifieds there, that might be education. It might be medicine, right? Because an apple a day keeps the doctor away. It might be like the Big Apple, like New York City. And so you have these different associations with apples, and then therefore also red. Red also sometimes reminds us of love, so we make that connection to love and passion. And red sometimes is like that fiery passion and romantic and Valentine's Day and red can remind us of fire. As we know right now, fire is a big part of our lives around the nation where a lot of places are burning. So red can have those associations in our head, or blood, kind of bringing us back to medicine, or horror, or damage, or wounds, or something like that, right? So you have all these different associations that your brain is making consciously with the color red. Usually in class, I also ask you to take a look at the word pig. And I start to ask students, what do you think of when you think of the word pig? And I write pig on the board. What would you say? So students have all these different things like pink, mud, farms, bacon, dirty. And then they start even going even deeper and they think cups. Or they think fat and eat too much and slobs. Or then they sometimes go to chauvinistic. So you have all these different connotations and associations with the word pig that your brain is doing. Um, this is just happening. You're firing. These things are firing around in here. Okay, so I just kind of want to show you how the sign, the signifier, and the signifieds work together. So semiotics is a study of signs. A sign is something or anything really that carries meaning. Okay, a signifier is the visual or mental representation of the sign. So that picture you get in your head, the word on the page. And then the signified is the meaning that's attached in all of its vastness. Okay, so a little reminder there. So here's something that's another piece of art that I want us to look at and analyze together. And so I'm going to try again to get this video going for you really quick. Let's see. Okay, let me go over here.
A picture popped up on our screens today, and we're sorry, we just can't seem to peel our eyes away. Because what you're looking at, and this is no slip of the tongue, is art. And it just sold for north of $100,000 at the big Art Basel gathering in Miami. Many an artist was misunderstood in their lifetimes. Van Gogh, yes, the Van Gogh.
I don't know what happened there. Sorry, guys.
Only sold one painting ever. Maybe we're missing something with the banana and duct tape, like an unfathomable metaphor about the banana that decays, but the tape, as any do-it-yourselfer knows, pretty much lasts forever. Still, we have a few questions. As the banana rots, does the art appreciate or depreciate? If I go home and make my own banana and duct tape art, does that mean I'm an artist? Only if you get paid for it. Harry Smith, NBC News.
All right. So, okay. So the banana on the wall, guys. This literally was going on last year. And it was funny because I was preparing my semiotics lecture when this news story ran. And I was like, what a perfect example of what I'm actually trying to teach my students. So my myth students got this as like a late addition to my lecture last year. But when you look at this as a piece of art, it shows again, like there's no such thing as high art and low art, is it? It's the meaning that's attached and society's projections on what creates high art and low art that creates these things. So you're looking at this banana duct taped to a wall that was on the wall of an art gallery. So because it's in this art gallery, we've already deemed it as meaningful and high art, right? But the fact that it's there and it's drawing all this attention is meaningful, and it's something to kind of analyze. And so it sold for $120,000 about. In fact, and it doesn't matter what the banana is. At one point during the show, the banana had gotten a little bit too soft, and so they just replaced the banana and backed it to the wall. And then at one point during the show, somebody came up and ate the banana, so dismantled the art, ate the banana, and then spray painted on the wall, Jeffrey Epstein did not kill himself. And so it doesn't matter what banana it is. There's nothing significant about this banana or this duct tape. But usually within class, what we start to do is we start to analyze these things. So we kind of start to diagram it out semiotically. What associations do we make with bananas? And so we kind of start to talk about it. So I just want you to think about it for just a second. What associations do we make with bananas? What other things do you think of? What are some of the things that come up for you? So you might have said some things like yellow, monkeys. Some people say like tropical. Sometimes people think about like trade, like international trade, or like maybe we get them from Mexico or whatever these places are. And inevitably, depending on how well my myth classes know me and how comfortable they feel with me, many of them are thinking it. Some of them are scared to say it, but many will eventually say penis. Because it's true. Many times when we see a banana, sometimes our minds will subconsciously or consciously go there. and think about penises. And that's okay. You know, we are adults. We can talk about penises without having to be too embarrassed about it. Then we kind of do the same with tape. You know, what do you see in duct tape? You see sort of a fix-it, you see tools, you see men, you know, duct taping things. You see it holding things together or restricting things or, you know, something like that, fixing it. Um, those are, you see like longevity, like it lasts forever. So we kind of assess these two things on the board and we think about, you know, what meaning then could you generate if you put these things together in this piece of art? What might this piece of art be saying if you look at those two separate semiotic analyses and kind of put them together? And a few conclusions are sometimes drawn. And sometimes I have to kind of get students there, but some students do, they kind of put it together right away. There's been a couple that have said things like, well, it could be a commentary on international trade or ecosystems and us destroying ecosystems. It could be this idea that we have tried to put like our American band-aid to try to make sure that we have food security in this nation, when maybe other developing nations, the ones that are sending us this food, we provide a quick fix for them, and it's usually not enough. So if you know anything about sort of the complicated nature of international trade, you might come to a conclusion there. Another conclusion that's drawn sometimes when we think of banana in terms of male genitalia, penises, this came out sort of at the tail end of the Me Too movement, and there's been a lot of discussion in society today about male sexuality and rape culture, and just a lot of consent has been extremely important, and women's voices have been coming out and saying, you know, he did this to me that I was not consensual, and he sexually assaulted me in this way. And men are going, well, this was okay, or I didn't know that I was doing something wrong. And so some have said this is a commentary on male sexuality, like needing to be fixed, needing to be addressed, needing to be restricted in some ways that it hasn't been restricted in the past, that they need to check themselves in a way or whatever. So let's put our fix it on that type thing. So that's another way you could analyze this and maybe interpret it. And then some other people have even taken it to like a technology aspect where you have this fruit, this banana that's known as one of the most quickly ripening fruits of all of them. And if you think of the banana as a symbol of monkeys, you could also think about like evolution, right? Because we supposedly came from monkeys according to evolution. And if you think about how humans, who really are a very young species on our planet, if you again look at evolution, we then also have this mortality that we're always trying to deal with. And in myth class, we're always kind of talking about that. Well, humans are always trying to like transcend and become immortal somehow. And so if the banana sort of represents us and our impermanence and how we will not last forever and how we will die, what are we trying to fix it with? And one of the things that people have said is, well, we're trying to fix it with technology. And you can look at the duct tape as a tool or a tech or piece of technology that they're trying to fix and make this thing that's not eternal. They're trying to make it eternal. And some people have read it like that. And so I know some of those meanings are very deep, and we might not be used to like digging that deep. But that's, I mean, essentially, those are some really good metaphorical analysis driven conclusions that you could come to about this silly banana duct tape to the wall. Okay. So anyway, so there's that. So let's see if we can get forward here on our slideshow again. We're going to have an issue. Okay. So I want you to take a mental check, and usually I have everybody kind of take a break at this point. So if you need to pause and take a break, feel free to do so right now. And then when you come back, I want you to take a second and just like mentally check in. Do you understand, based on this point of the slideshow and the presentation, what is semiotics? What is a sign? What is a signifier? And what is a signified? And just give yourself a mental check. Okay? give you a second to do that. Okay. And then sometimes this is when I would break up the lecture and I would give part of it one day and part of it the next day. And so I like to just kind of remind you of the goal. We are going through all of this really to kind of help you understand the connections between the signs, signifier and signified. And my goal is that you'll start to really sort of analyze the messages that are coming at you, especially from marketing industries and products that you're consuming, and look at how a semiotic analysis can help you be a more critical consumer and not just a compliant one. So here's what I want you to think of next. Which of these three things, which of these is a sign? Obviously, you can't think, pair, share right now if you're watching this on your own. Perhaps I'll get the sub to show it. I don't know if that will work very well. But which of these is a sign? Think about it. Often students will say something like, well, the white rose, because it carries meaning, more meaning in it. It carries more symbolism, which I could totally see. It's kind of a valid assessment. But eventually, students will finally come to the conclusion that, in fact, all three of these things is a sign, because a sign is anything that carries meaning. And all three of these images carry meaning within it. Dog, a dog, we could go through the whole process of what assumptions, associations, connections do you make with dog. Same with these other two. The look on the girl's face definitely carries meaning, and we can make assumptions about it and make connections to it. So really, all three of these are signs. So going off of the last, the girl's face, that looks like it might be confused or something like that. Often then that leads us here. Do we then make assumptions about people based on how they look? And so then we just work in class on reading these three guys, reading these three bearded gentlemen. What stories do they tell you? What assumptions do you make about them based on the visual of what they look like? It's funny because a kid always will say, well, yeah, we make these assumptions, but you're going to tell me next that these are all the same guy. Actually, I'm not. They're not all the same guy. But it would be interesting to think about if they were all the same guy, and how you might make assumptions about this person's life, right, based on how they look. So, this first guy, you might see this first guy as a successful businessman. Maybe he's in marketing, maybe he's a banker, a Wall Street guy. He looks like he's got, his own, real estate firm or something like that. He looks like a schmoozer, right? So he's going to come up, he's going to definitely sell himself to you, and that's how he's successful. This guy in the middle is kind of like non-conforming, maybe smokes some weed, lives in his camper or like in his van. I don't know. These are things that students have said. So I'm not saying these things. Students say these things. Obviously, we're making generalizations, but that's the whole point. I'm showing you how our brains automatically do this. So this guy who's kind of a hippie, right? He just doesn't want to like necessarily go with the grain and do everything that the social ethos and his enculturation is telling him to do. And then you've got the guy, probably a Carhartt beanie right here, a little bearded man. He's got the little flannel on and his camera. Maybe he's like a vlogger. It looks like he might be from Fort Collins, Colorado. Maybe he's from Denver. He looks like kind of like a hipster. I like to be outdoorsy. Maybe, hey, do you want to come back to my tiny house and hang out or something like that? Definitely could be like an influencer or something like that. You start to make these assumptions and you start to build stories in your head. And that's because when we see something and the way we choose to look, those are signs in our head, and our subconscious is making all kinds of meaning from them that we may not even realize that our subconscious is making. So we've done a lot of examples. We've looked at art, we've looked at just some words, we've looked at visuals like how people look. Another thing that's really useful to analyze and we would honestly be remiss if we didn't try to analyze, is objects of mass production. Anything that's mass produced for our consumption is something that is worth our analysis. And so, for the sake of us here in school, I really wanted to have us analyze the school desk. And this is always a very fun practice. And so, for the sake of this analysis, this semiotic analysis, I say this school desk up here on the board, I want us to analyze it. And what I talked about next is the steps. And so, these are the steps in semiotic analysis. And so, whatever you choose for your essay or whatever, you can go through these steps in your semiotic analysis. The first step is to analyze and determine context. And here are some questions to help you do that, determine context. I usually have you do that together. So with what things can this object be associated? Obviously, we associate it with school and classrooms, right? With what systems is it a part? And I like you to think about like social systems and stuff like that. So obviously, our social federal education system is one major obvious in this. How is it different from other models, types, and styles? And when students and I talk about this, a couple of things that they notice is like, for example, the arm thing up here, where you can see it's obviously for a right-handed person. Girls always point out these little metal things and talk about how those catch in their hair. And so those are some of the subtle differences between this desk and maybe the desks you would be sitting in the classroom. So just kind of how is it different from other models, types, and styles? But it's not that much different than the ones you're sitting in the classroom. Is it a part of a pattern? Are there others like it? I mean, absolutely. We see desks that are very similar to it across the country. We see them across the school. We see them even like in middle school and stuff. Some classrooms are changing to tables, but we can definitely say it's a part of the pattern in education. Okay? Step 2 is to start asking why. So why is this object built or structured or used as it is? And this is where we get into a little bit deeper, right? We think it a little bit deeper. So it's built the way that it is to a lot of students will come up with, and I'll just tell you what things they were saying on Monday. It's sort of built to contain you. Like everything that you need is right here. You have your surface, you have your books underneath. Especially that desk with the bar there, it doesn't want you to be able to get out very quickly. It wants you to be contained. Like this is your space, stay in it. You know, this is the space you're allowed to take up. We also often talk about comfort levels, like it's not built to be comfortable. It's not built to be something you can like lounge in and enjoy. It's not necessarily built to like lean back in because it can be kind of catastrophic when you do that. It's very much built to make sure that you're awake, paying attention, and contained, right? And so a lot of those things, again, are there. It also it has a place for you to put your books. It doesn't. You can see by the way it's built, we don't want you to maybe get up, wander around, go get things. Everything you need is right there. So those are some of the things that were talked about in class on Monday. And then step 3, and sorry, it's a typo, it still says step 2. Step 3, so this is the deeper analysis portion. So now that we've assessed the context and we've assessed, why it's built the way that it is, we can really start to dig into, well, if those are the things, if it's associated with education, classrooms, learning, and it's meant to keep us contained, still, not comfortable, but uncomfortable, and it's meant to keep us alert and awake, but really in a disciplined, constrained sort of way. Well, then look at that a little bit deeper. What does this object then reveal about our cultural ideologies, values, beliefs, fears, desires, wishes, regrets, accomplishments? What does this then reveal? So we take it a step deeper. So when you look at this desk and you see it's meant for confinement, it's meant for some discomfort. We pack as many of them into a room as we can. It's meant to be practical in some ways, right? Because we need a lot of space to get people in. They all pretty much look the same. There's not a whole lot of variation. what does that say about our ideologies within our education system? Okay, think about that for a second. Some of the conclusions that students often come to is, well, or our conclusions are, well, they seem to want us to all sort of be the same. They don't want us to be like too creative or too out there. They want to standardize us. The desks are kind of standard. They test us in a standard way. We kind of are told to stay confined and stay uncomfortable and listen. They want to churn out a standardized product. Maybe that's reflective of the ideologies of our education system. We value education, and so we don't want you to sleep through it. We don't want you to doze off through it. We don't want you to be too comfortable. A lot of times people start to make the connection between, we're churning out students in this standardized way because we need them to enter the workforce and we need them to be ready to work and take on jobs. And a lot of times that is brought into our conversation about ideologies reflected in the desk and values reflected in the desk. We want to churn out as many reliable workers as we can out of the education system. And some things in the desk kind of reflect that, the way that it's made and the assumptions and associations we have with it. Some of our fears are that you won't stay within your limits. You won't stay within the categories that we put you in and the container that we put you in. Perhaps that's a societal fear. If you're too other, if you're too different, fear can come in with that. That should probably remind you of your monster reading too, right? Things like things like that. Things like that. That's what you're looking at with the desk. So you get to this point and you think, oh my God, like all of that from something as seemingly neutral as a desk. Literally nothing is neutral, and that's something that I want you to see through semiotic analysis. You may be presented with this seemingly neutral image, but look at all the assumptions, connections, implications, connotations that we drew just from looking more deeply and analyzing an object of mass production like a school desk. Think of all of the depth of meaning then that you could glean from looking at something like this that has so effectively started to consume us, and instead of us just consuming them. And so there are a lot of different things that you could look at. And when you really start to semiotically and deeply analyze that thing, you see that nothing is neutral. Everything carries weight, carries meaning, carries depth. It's crazy. And that's one of the reasons why I really like semiotics, is because it teaches you how to see symbols in everything. It teaches you how a sign can be anything, and that meaning is attached to everything, every single thing. And that really nothing is neutral. So usually what we do then is in class, I will give you some assignments. Like I want you to analyze those hydro flasks, and I want you to analyze this photo of this Hummer, this vehicle. I usually like hand out photos and just have you kind of look at them and discuss with your groups how you might go through those steps, step 1, 2, and 3. Context, and start to ask why, and then start to look at those deeper reflection questions. And so we would kind of do that in class. So here's the steps, again, just to kind of remind you. And so think about it. Think if you had to analyze like a hydro flask, or one of my favorites last year, when a lot of the girls were wearing, like they would wear dresses, but then like flowery dresses, and they would wear those like Doc Martens that look like combat boots. And I said, okay, you've chosen to look like this. What does this look say? Like, what's the story behind this fashion trend? And a lot of times we would arrive at things such as, femininity is still important, but the females have become empowered and have started to challenge some of those gender norms and gender expectations. And boom, absolutely, right? But look at how this is being reflected in our fashion choices, which we may not have even cognizantly been aware that that was happening. Hydro flasks, or the picture of the Hummer is one of my favorite ones because we kind of get into class things with that. Obviously, this is um, a vehicle that costs a lot of money, and it's like a military vehicle, but that's not, because it's just like the pop culture version of a military vehicle. And usually it sits up high. And so it's like, what do people that drive these Hummers, what do they maybe kind of want, or where do they align themselves? And so there are some things like, what are their priorities and values? Like people that own a Hummer or this Hummer, what does it say about the people that own them? You start to really dig into that, and it can get kind of interesting. Hydro flasks, again, are when cell phones, AirPods we did last year, and on Monday as well. And a lot of those things, vape, you guys read the semiotics of vaping. Well, what about a vape? I don't usually ask a student to like pull out their vape or anything, because that would be kind of rude. But we think about that. We think about, okay, so say AirPods, for example, start to analyze it, and we find out a lot of times that, yeah, they're convenient and they're good, but a lot of it isn't about the convenience and the practicality and the functionality of the product. A lot of it is about the what the product says about you and where it puts you as far as your status in society. And that's something I kind of want you to start to see as you're doing these analyses. When is it a status in society? I am not going to answer that. Sorry, my phone is ringing because I am recording. So I just kind of then, we usually close class, we connect all of this and reflect on it individually. And think about how having this understanding of a sign, a signifier, and a signified can really help you become more active or more critical consumers. Like, how does having this ability to think critically about a thing, how does it make you a more critical or an active consumer, and how does that benefit you in the long run? And we think about that. So I would love for you to just reflect on that question and reflect on your notes, and just be thinking of that. And I hope you have this image in your head as you leave. Oftentimes, we're not only thinking about the banana with duct tape on the wall, but students will start to also analyze, well, this image, this is important, but guess what else? This is important. Why was our attention so drawn to this? And what do the pictures on our cell phones of this mean? And in a lot of ways, a lot of experts would say that this is an interesting photo in and of itself because of all the meaning you can draw from it, not just from the banana, but from the picture of the person taking a photo of the banana on their cell phone, right? Okay, I think that's it. I'm pretty excited to talk about monsters next week. I love talking about monsters. I'm excited, in case you couldn't tell from my little beatbox rave that I just did. I'm kind of embarrassed. In hindsight, I shouldn't have done that. I just, one take. One take. This is a 48-minute lecture. One take. I am not doing another take. I am sorry, person, that I did not answer the phone. Okay. Semiotics, there you go. I hope that you can use those steps and this information to kind of start your essay. But you can also wait until we talk about monsters this week to start your essay, because you can do your essay on a cultural object, something like your desk or whatever, or you can do your essay on a monster. And what's really cool is you can combine the two. Okay, it is spooky season, so we had to talk about monsters. Enjoy. Sorry that this is so long. It really is often a long lecture. It would have been even longer if we were in class, because I would have been asking you a lot of questions. So there you have it. Good luck with everything, and let me know, since I'm not here to talk you through and walk you through everything, if you need anything this week, okay? All right, later.